comments on the presentation. Moving on, the next presenter is Shivangi Agarwal, an undergraduate student from SMEF's Brick School of Architecture, located in Pune, India. The title of the thesis is An Inclusive Paradigm to Sustain Fishermen Communities, Catalyzing Inevitable Infrastructural Growth at Tajpur, India, guided by Shraddha Manjrekar and Rohit Pottar under the team Urban Management. I'll let you take over, Shivangi. You can present now.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Yeah, is my screen visible?
Yes.
Yeah. As the topic stated, the two most important terminology in my topics reads is inclusivity, which will be described in terms of sociology and economics and somewhat culturally. And the second is inevitable infrastructural growth. So I'm not questioning, and I'm saying that growth is given. It's just that it shouldn't be done as a fact of overall development, but the context and neighborhood should also be given an opportunity to thrive equally. Going further, so the major question which comes to mind is, can growth and inclusivity reinforce each other? So be it developed or developing country, throughout the world we see urbanization happening, but we only see growth being done physically and inclusivity being preached. So the major question which arises is this. So one of the major projects which connects the entire world and which contributes to the economy of a nation majorly are port developments. So further in this thesis, I'll be talking about port development. So I've taken a comparison of India and China, and I've questioned, is port development or water development being done the correct way? Why these two countries? Because the major reason is because of the population similarities and also the contextual proximity. So the major problems which I've noticed is that coastal erosion, high carbon emission, pollution, ecology loss, community displacement, and decreasing economy. Even though China is a developed country and India is still a developing country, these cases are still being seen in the port development projects which are being done. And even in India, it has the coastal regulation started in the early 1950, and till today, the coastal regulations are being revised only for the infrastructural development, and the community benefits are being termed as the next phase. So the next phase which has never come till now. But one thing which also comes to mind is something must have been done around the world. And what are those small steps? So I've taken 8 case studies from around the world and pointed out that how mitigation can be done, coastal protection can be done, community can be engaged. There can be public amenities to save the ecology, conscious construction, keeping the ecology, coast, and the required infrastructure in mind, cultural identity. Yeah. So moving on. Yeah. Coming to Tajpur, one of the coastal towns in West Bengal, a new port is being proposed over here, and the community still doesn't have any idea of where the port is coming and what compensation they are going to get. The only occupation which is known to them is fishing, but their land is under threat due to the port coming up. Tajpur is surrounded by two metropolitans, which is Kolkata and Bhubaneswar. So it makes it an urban pressure point, which also can be an opportunity, but it can also susceptible to exploitation. Right now, there is unplanned urbanization happening at Tajpur. That is due to economic reasons, hotels coming up, markets being set up in an unplanned manner. I did an analysis of a 25-kilometer stretch to understand how urbanization is getting approached towards Tajpur, and I surely see that there are hotels and unplanned infrastructure built up happening, and the port coming, and the community size is decreasing day by day. Further analyzing the site, the topography, how the community resides, the uh, primary, connectivity through it, the built-unbuilt ratio, and also the vegetation which exists on the site, which needs to be uh, conserved. So to achieve inclusivity, there are certain layers in which I explored further. First layer being the ecology layer, how we can include certain things which will be catering to the ecology is providing aquaponics or bog gardens to the existing marshes, agriculture, bioswale, pavements, rain gardens and picnic spots, jog tracks and foot bridges. So these are all measures which can be taken for mitigation and also conserving the existing ecology, rainwater, stormwater runways, and also coral reef regrowth and filtration module. The second layer, which I feel was necessary, was how the port can have a positive influence on its immediate context. And these are some of the things which is a recreational space, like with the ecological trees which are over there. We can have cafes and small boutiques over there, and then a vocational institute to actually educate the communities over there of how the change is happening and how they can also be a part of it. Fish facility and waste management, teaching how their primary occupation can be a business, and they do not have to be dependent on the port for jobs in the future, but they can make a livelihood of their own occupation. Then residential block because of the floating population, office and retail, and a town hall, which is very important due to that meetings should be held, which should include the community stakeholders and people whose land they belong to. Then social urban infrastructure, hotel and leisure activities, bank, health, education, marketplace, and watchtowers. So summarizing all, how ecology can, how inclusivity can be achieved is giving the nature back to the coast, then having hotels and leisure activities, giving one part of the coast back to the community, because this is where the land belonged to first. Then the healthcare, education, and banks and everything which is required to make up a town. Then office, retails, market spaces, which will build the economy, the housing facilities, which is absolutely a must, then business opportunities, which should be thrived by the community, vocational institute for educating the community, and agriculture and pisciculture, which will be a requirement for self-sustenance. So through this model of inclusivity, the fishermen community benefits, the stakeholders and investors benefit, and even the floating population has something to look forward to. Coming to the architecture interventions, the first which I explored was an inclusive hub. So, yeah, sorry. Yeah. So, this is an inclusive hub. This is a museum, a beachfront with activities, a deck for the fishermen community to interact, and a deck for the public to interact. So, keeping the trees of the context as it is and opening up the structure as much as I can and putting on my function. This is this structure look like, and so building the spaces of how I've given community plus recreational spaces, spa plus indoor badminton courts, fish auction houses, library and play area, cafe pods, community kitchen dining, movie hall, restaurant pods, farmers market plus farming, festival plus artist corner, cold storage, and job tracks. So basically, an inclusive hub which has something to do with everybody, women of the fisherman family, the kids of the fisherman family, the fishermen apart from fishing, they can come here and participate in the auction and have an additional occupation. Then the people coming in from outside and the stakeholders, and then even around the year, India being such a diverse culture, we have so many festivals and artists around for them to have a a respite space. Then the museum, I feel building a museum was so important to mark the permanence of the community here, to show what their actual history looks like. So aquarium pathway, which splits into old vessel museums and displays of what the history actually looks like, and a spillover with the tensile squares for just spillover of interaction with the public and the fishermen communities over here, and this spillovers to the beach right here. The second most, the second. Yeah. The second important intervention I felt was a boat workshop, because when the fishermen goes fishing in the morning, they come back and they have to repair their boats and their nets, but there is no actual shaded space for them to be. So a boat workshop was very much necessary, but how to make it economic was I introduced a miniature boat workshop for actual public to also participate and experience how the fishermen community live and how their occupation works. So the economy is also getting generated and their livelihood also getting, the quality is getting better. So the materials used for these structures are all something which is familiar to the community. And tensile is one thing which comes under question of how will they know, but tarpaulin is something which they use in their boats, and it's a similar texture and is a similar properties like a tensile roof. So they are familiar with the how the fabric works. And the third most important, I feel, is housing is so important in our country right now for every community to have. So I've given incremental housing, which is a 1 BHK module, 2 BHK module, a 3 BHK module, a commercial module, which is basically a 1.5 BHK plus a shop in the ground floor, and a homestay module for public to actually experience the proper Indian intimacy colonies which we have for a community. So the 1 BHK basically increments to the 2 BHK and 2 BHK to the 3 BHK, which will happen with time and with the economic status increasing. This is a typical section which I've drawn of how the commercial module, the housing module, and the homestays are going to look like. Over here, the development shows how I've made the
Your
clusters.
time is up. I'll have to ask you to wind up now.
Yes, I'm just in the second last slide. Yeah. So, and this is how the cluster looks like. So yeah, so maintaining how the colonies of India works and giving them a permanent space to the community. This is how the housing looks like. So at the end, I just want to say that infrastructure growth should happen, but it should keep in mind the context and the neighborhood communities. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Infrastructural growth is an indispensable part of urban development, and achieving the intended output of this process involves all key stakeholders. I believe that the presentation did draw our attention to the fact that inclusive growth is an indispensable part of urban management. On to our panelists for their comments on the presentation. Can we start with Dr. Manoj?
Yeah, my first question is whether is it an architectural thesis or a planning thesis?
It's an architectural thesis.
Yeah, so I do have one concern here. In fact, it's a very extensive kind of a project that you have done. I don't know how much as a graduate student, be a graduate student, you can understand this complexity of this particular site, which is quite evident in the presentation. I really commend the kind of hard work that you have done, and the type of documentation that you have done, and the kind of drawings that you have produced. It's quite extensive. But keeping this in mind, if you look at the content of this particular thesis, what I felt was you are speaking about inclusivity, and obviously what I understood is that you are speaking about the marginalized community of fishermen, right?
Yes.
So if you look at the kind of changes that is happening along the coastal region all over India, or maybe even in many countries, uh, mechanization and the process of the giving away of the traditional fishing, everything is kind of very much prominent in this particular area.
Yeah.
And the type of life that these fishermen have lived all over the years, it's slowly changing, it's transforming. And the pace of transformation is pretty fast. So the type of villages that we find all around the coastal region, it's the kind of transformation that is happening is it's very abrupt and very kind of challenging. So here let me come to my point. When you speak about inclusivity, first thing what you have to do is that you have to do a thorough study of the community as a whole,
Yes.
where those things were totally missing in this. The characteristic feature of this community, the content of the community, or maybe the components of this community living was not at all presented well, or maybe I couldn't see that. Possibly you might know that. And suddenly what happens is that from there, that's the limitation of an architectural thesis. You
Yes.
jumped into that, you suddenly jumped into the design part, where you came up with n number of projects, you came up with a museum, you came up with restaurants, you came up with, lots of things. So even from an architectural perspective, being a student of VR, I don't know how much you can seriously, do designs at such a huge project. If you could concentrate it to one part of that, right? Like for example, if you were like concentrating on to inclusivity and how that inclusivity can be brought in building up a community space, this would have been great. Instead of taking up this entire region and entire area. So you said that you did a survey of 25 kilometers, which is far beyond your comprehension as a VR student. So anyway, I really appreciate the hard work
So
that you
to
have done.
understand the context was so
Yeah.
important, because there was nothing existing on Tajpur right now for,
Yeah,
how
but it
coastal
was,
Yeah.
it was always nice because you have that vigor in you. You have got that kind of, the capacity to work hard. I believed if you could concentrate, or maybe if you could come up with a small area where you sincerely did justice to inclusivity as a theme and brought in the kind of a, design for that particular place, that would have made a lot of difference. It's just a comment.
Yes, sir. For sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Can we hear from Architect Nicolo next?
Yeah. So thanks for the presentation. I think it was like super interesting and relevant. Maybe the only problem was that, I mean, due to the perks and to the problems of the device we have in the front, some parts were really too small and we couldn't really appreciate them. So that maybe is a gap. But overall, I need to say it was really a lot of work. So it was maybe even too much. You did really a lot of work. And I also really appreciated the graphics, all the diagrams. They were really cared and super interesting. The first part you presented was super relevant and interesting, I think, because in a certain sense, you proposed a sort of toolkit. So according to the different parts of the city, the different atmospheres and sections of what happens, you have different solutions. Of course, kept general, because in the end it's a toolkit. And I completely share the previous comment that maybe in some parts you have too much and you have the approach of an architect. So you have the museum, the hub, I mean, you have all the different parts. And then in a certain sense, you miss the connection between the different parts, which in urban design maybe are even more important than the building itself. So the interface between what we design as architects and what we design as a space, as open space. And so, yeah, one of the main questions was, is if you reflected on how the hub and the museum speak of what happens in the in-between, the tension that is created between these two different masses. And yeah, because I think like these type of relationships are crucial. And I mean, in all the work you presented, there were so many interesting parts, so I cannot really give compliments for everything. And I think like the incremental housing was super interesting. Maybe a possible going forward could be to better study the typologies in assembling the different parts. So not to have like just serial elements, so like punctual, your punctual catalog, which is put on the plot, but maybe you can aggregate two of them and you get a line. Maybe you have four of them and you get a spot. Maybe you create some courtyards. I mean, to use these incremental housing to also design the space. So not just to use them as like elements to feel, but also to create something. And yeah, thanks. That is all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we hear from Dr. Nabil?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation, and the project is really interesting. And by the way, it's timely, because I don't know if you were aware of the event of the UIA Congress. It was in July, just 1 month before. UAE, which is the International Union of Architects, and their motto or their slogan was called future sustainability and leave no one behind. And the main focus was how to achieve inclusivity. And it was really debatable. Please look at the publication issues and even the online YouTube issues, because it seems that inclusive design is just focusing more on social. And in your approach, you're focusing more on ecological. That's fine, of course. But what if you're going to combine it with the social aspect and then try to bring everyone inside and try to merge things? Because one of your slides was titled Achieving Inclusivity. It seems like it's a little bit like separated border layers. At this sector, I'm going to provide this. At this sector, I'm going to provide that. So if you're talking about inclusivity, it means that you need to merge or remove the layers between issues, not that rigid line. I know that you're not going to do a rigid line, but I mean, presenting that in this way, it might just give the sense that they are just like the old 60s zoning, that this part I'm going to do this part I'm going to do that. So try to avoid this way of showing your idea, because it might hurt the idea, not supporting it that much. And please look at the outcome of this Congress. Really going to help you if you're going to develop the idea of inclusivity. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for